Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Anthony Monta. I'm the Associate Director of the Nanovic Institute for European Studies. Welcome to the second installment of our film series this semester in fall 2016. Tonight's film is set in 1835 in Romania, so I'm going to try to do my best to sort of render the background that's pretty complex to give you an idea of what's being staged here. But I want to open with the following quotation, and I want you to think and try to guess who said this. Never before have I seen so much fragmentation and so little commonality in our union. That was Jean-Claude Juncker from just a few days ago, the State of the Union address for the European Union. Let's think about tonight's film. The land here that you're about to see sits astride a very lucrative trade route from the Black Sea to the center of Europe, essentially. The land is sandwiched between rival empires. The Russian Empire to the east, the Roman Empire back in the day to the west, Austria, Hungary, and of course to the south, and most important to the history of this region at this time, the Ottoman Empire. The people here are a mixture of peoples, a very interesting mixture, from Thracians back in the ancient period, Ghetto-Dacians, Romans, Goths, Huns, Gepids, Avars, Settlers, Saxon, Hungarians, Roma, and Slavs, and their descendants, and the people who were traveling through. There was no nation here until well into the 19th century. Instead, the area was composed of principalities. Wallachia in the south, and that's the setting of tonight's film. That's where Bucharest is located, if you know the region. There's Moldavia to the northeast, as you get closer to Russia. And a third major region, Transylvania, is located to the north across the Carpathian Mountains. The two southern principalities are ruled as suzerainties by the Ottoman Empire at this time, in a more or less attenuated way since the 15th century. But this rule was continuously contested. So one way of telling the story of modern Romania is to focus on how these peoples and how these principalities came to be integrated as a nation during the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. This is a complicated story, so let me just focus on 1835, which you're about to see. So in 1835, Wallachia was being administered by a Russian. His name was Pavel Kiselov, and he was installed by Nicholas I, the Tsar of Russia, who had just won the latest round of conflicts with the Ottoman Empire. So he was able to convince the Ottomans that, as a condition of victory, he gets to put in the chief administrator for these principalities. Kiselov, as long as it took, the Ottoman Empire to pay their war reparations. And that took about 6 years. See if you can hear some parallels here. Kiselov's administration codified the political, the legal, to some extent the economic system in these principalities by devising what he called the organic statutes, a kind of proto-constitution. And that applied to both Wallachia and Moldavia. So historians have seen in Kiselov's reforms a sort of foundation for national unification, which was still a couple of decades in the future. So during the period of tonight's film, what we're seeing is kind of the integration of a Romanian nation. The population was growing, the rural culture was giving way to an urban one, the public administration and the legal systems had just been centralized and harmonized, a middle class was beginning to appear and challenge the political monopoly of the ruling elites, such as upper-class Greeks who were installed by the Ottomans to run things, and the native boyars. You'll hear that term in tonight's film. The boyars are the sort of landed gentry of the time, the noble men. And increasingly, the sons of these boyars and of all the upper class and the upper middle class were being educated in Paris. So they were imbibing a lot of this sort of liberal idealism that was sweeping the younger generations in Europe and inspiring them to lead revolutions across Europe a little bit later in 1848. So we're before 1848, we're in a really complicated, convoluted, interesting time. when people are starting to use terms like nation and fatherland in a language called Romanian. In the midst of all of this, there lived about 250 to 500,000 Roma, gypsies, who were, since the 14th century, slaves. Slavery was legal, particularly for the Roma at this time. Freedom for them didn't come until 1864, well after the period of this film. But just 2 years after 1835, a very prominent Romanian intellectual, Mihail Cogal-Nicianu, and I apologize if I'm butchering that name, had published a book calling for their emancipation. So again here, there's something on the cusp of change. The Roma, of course, had been in Romania for a long time, since they were pushed out of Rajasthan in the 11th century, as best scholars can tell, migrated up through the south of Europe. So they've been in this part of Romania since late 13th, 14th century. So shadows and light all around. And the film's director, a young guy named Radu Juda, said that basically we're all a mixture of beauty and ugliness in an interview. And so I guess the last comment would be, as you watch tonight's film, does his film say AFERIM, which is the word for bravo or well done? Does he say that ironically? Does he say it unironically? Is it sardonic? What's the sort of emotional valence of the film? This is what some critics have tried to grapple with here. Or should we look for simply what he describes as, I consider my main influence the work of Yasujiro Ozu, Japanese film director, post-war. What I love in all of Ozu's films is not only his style and his stories, but above all the melancholy tenderness expressed toward his characters, toward life actually. And I think this attitude, pessimistic and hopeless, but at the same time calm and distant and humorous, reveals some kind of truth about our life. But if we think with Jean-Claude Juncker, about this, we might also say, okay, but now what? So enjoy tonight's film. It's an interesting reflection at an interesting time in European history. Thank you.